Revolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, Padmanabha Maharaj and Sweta Dweep. We're so happy to be here today and to welcome you to this episode. Today we'll be starting chapter 1, which is called Love's Odyssey, From Seed to Perpetual Blossoming. And today we're going to be focusing on a subsection of that chapter, which is called Love as the Ultimate Ethic. So you mentioned the word catalyst in the introduction of the chapter, and then the word ethic in the beginning also. So I really would like to explore those as time allows, but I think we should begin with your understanding, your conception, and what you mean by the word love. I have the definition here from your book, and it's you say love is a profoundly intentional disposition, free from ulterior motives, aimed at promoting the best for the one we love. So I'm kind of wondering how you feel that particular definition differs from how other ways we might think of love.
Yeah, when speaking about love, it's always a challenge to define things, because defining, giving definitions sometimes amount to limiting what we are defining to that particular definition, and definitions are words, and words never encompass the totality of anything, what to speak of love, right? So it's a dangerous exercise, but at the same time, it's a necessary one, because we need to, especially a term like love, which along with the term maybe I, is one of those words we use the most, and many times we understand the least, or we apply them very loosely to anything and everything. So if it applies equally to anything and everything in any and every way possible, it becomes nothing instead of everything. So, but yeah, I want to clarify first that it's delicate, especially with the word love. And I think I quote in my book, I have it here. Before giving my definition, I try to humble myself in terms of, okay, you think you're about to define love. Watch out for a grandiose complex of grandiosity or something. So I share some words from Rumi, right? And Rumi says, whatever I try to say, explaining love, and here you have someone who explains love really well. Whatever I try to say explaining love is embarrassing. Some commentary clarifies, but with love, silence is clearer. A pen went scribbling along, but when it tried to write love, it broke. So that's how I preface my attempt to say something about love, just to be sober enough and realize that here we are addressing the ultimate reality, right? Not only the ultimate ethic, the ultimate catalyst, the ultimate everything. So yeah, I think it's important to, part of the definition is a caution to the definition itself. And of course, then comes the definition that you shared, profoundly, love is a profoundly intentional disposition free from ulterior motives, aim at promoting the best for the one we love, which for me is it's basically a rephrasing of the definition of, in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, the definition of Bhakti, or more precisely, Uttam Bhakti, or the highest form of devotion, loving devotion, given by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.1.11, Anyabilasita Sunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanabritam Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktiruttama. We don't have time to go into the details of that, but basically he is defining Uttam Bhakti as the attempt or the favorable, again, Anukul, favorable actions, and not only actions, it can be an inner disposition, thoughts, feelings, engaging all our faculties, devoid of separate agenda, devoid of dry renunciation, devoid of self-centered exploitation, to favorably love, serve Krishna, serve the sweet absolute. And I'd like to clarify as an extension to that, Jiva Goswami comments to this verse saying, well, this verse, this definition of love applies to Krishna, to God as the center, but that's still a narrow-minded definition. So a broader definition, which is implied in the verse, he says, is to love Krishna and to love everything that is related to Krishna. And of course, next comes the question, so what's related to Krishna? Or a better question, really, what is not related to Krishna? So the answer is everything is related to Krishna. Therefore, the goal of life is to love everything. So ultimately, for me, that's the broader and most encompassing, again, definition of love that I can think of, again, based on our tradition. I'm trying just to rephrase that here. And somehow it differs from other ideas of love, especially because of that many times when we say, I love this or that, is many times often very localized, very partial, very self-centered, very not encompassing. I love this group, but I hate that one. I love God, but I don't treat other people accordingly. I love chocolate, but I don't love myself, whatever the case. So those are very exclusionary definitions or expressions of love. Well, by its very nature and definition, love has to be all-embracing, all-encompassing. So those are some initial thoughts that come to my mind on again trying to define a tricky word as love. Especially, I remember a few days ago, at least from the time we are recording this conversation, I visited Father Richard Rohr in New Mexico, and we were talking in a podcast we recorded on love, and he will say how in Greek there are many words for love, philia, agape, eros, and I will say, yeah, in Sanskrit we have so many, also priti, bhava, rati, prema, rasa, and so on. But for some reason in English we mostly use one word only, love. That somehow it doesn't convey all the nuance and possibilities and embraciness that this reality actually implies. So yeah, it's a tricky subject, to say the least.
Our language misses nuance. So it's when I hear you speaking and explaining like that, then the word ethic to me makes more sense. And could you how did you frame in your mind the word ethic? Because that's kind of a word that is not so much used in the English language, or it's used in a different way than I think you intend. And also the word ultimate. It seems from hearing you, it could be replaced with radical also, to the root, because it's the root of love. It's the root ethic. Everything revolves around it.
Yeah, it's another way of saying that. Yeah, it's I mean that this is the beginning of the book, and I personally wanted to begin with love because, of course, the book itself is about love, evolution, and divine love. I will argue basically all of my work so far are about love in one way or another, and will continue hopefully to be about love in one way or another. But I wanted to begin with love, with the definition of love, and with an establishing of love as the ultimate ethic, because I consider that everything else, human purpose, nature, ethics, in the general way as we understand them, salvation, you name it, makes sense only when viewed through the lens of love. So love is the ultimate contextualizer, which puts everything into its place, which allows us to understand every other notion and virtue for what it actually is. No? Like love is the grammar of existence, if we want to use that expression, the guiding principle behind all other principles. I mean, the ultimate ethic, that's what I mean by that. Like, love is not just one more moral value among others. It's the ground, it's the foundation from which all true values arise, by which they can be judged and understood. Again, justice, truth, forgiveness, humility, compassion, courage, anything. All of these find their fullest meaning, expression through love. Because without love, all anything becomes rigid, distorted, even harmful. That's why I remember mentioning in radical personalism that with love, everything becomes justified, and without love, everything becomes an excuse or something like that. And now thinking about that, it makes me think that's what Sri Krishna means in the Bhagavad Gita when he speaks about bhakti or love, says Raja Vidya. So love is the king of knowledge, or the king of all education. Another way of saying the king of all virtues, the ultimate ethic around which everything else revolves. And it's such an ethic that is, again, it's the ultimate rule, and all other rules, as the scripture will say, make sense only if they take to that the ultimate rule. Love makes its own rules. Smarta vyasa tatam Vishnu will say in our tradition. All rules and regulations in the scripture are there to absorb ourselves in love for reality. Yeah, love is such an ultimate ethic that even applies to God, right? That's why it's the word ultimate is also there, because it applies to us, but it also applies to the ultimate person, to the ultimate reality. And if love is the ultimate ethic, it has to be capable of engaging with the divine. And it must be capable of engaging with everyone and everything unconditionally, with those in suffering, with those who do not deserve it, with those who are failing, with, I don't know. I mean, it does not require perfection as a prerequisite, let's put it that way. Love tells to everything and everyone that you still belong, and love continues to grow no matter what. That's why I also mentioned in this section that true love has no opposite, right? True love does not collapse into its opposite, doesn't become anything less than what it is, but it can only expand and become more of what it already is. So love as an ethic is not static, but dynamic and ever unfolding.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. Like, we have this law of physics. It's a law of inertia, where an object in motion will remain in motion until an opposing force, comes against it, and then it will slow down. It will come to a rest. But I was thinking, because there is no opposing force to love, there is no opposite to love, that it is free to expand. There's nothing that opposes it. So it's always going to expand and to grow, that nothing can diminish it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I personally do not, again, some people sometimes may ask what's the opposite of love, but I think it's the wrong question, because again, true love has no opposite. So we can only speak about the absence of love, because love still, in one sense, is a voluntary act. So we can choose to love or not. So when we don't choose to love, we can speak about an absence of love. But that there's an absence of love doesn't mean that there is an opposite to love. Love continues to be love. Love continues to become more of itself.
I was thinking how that hate or indifference or even fear is kind of the popular belief that is the opposite of love. Like, and one could also question then, how do you define harmful and violent acts in the world? One could look at it as an act of hate, or something coming out of fear, something like that. So we just want to see that as like, oh, that's the opposite of love. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, again, following at least how our tradition conceives that, we'll say that hate, fear, And all this stuff that we see in the news and in the world are all symptoms, right, of the root cause, not the problem itself. And the problem is, we will call it avidya. So avidya means absence, the absence of vidya. And as I mentioned a minute ago, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and this is coming just now, describes Bhakti or love as Raja Vidya, right? Like the king of all knowledge or the king of all education, that's love. So in a way, Vidya is synonymous for love. Raja Vidya, the king of knowledge, is love. So avidya is an absence of love. So it's not the opposite. Again, it's an absence. Avidya means an absence of love. So basically, we'll define that: hate, fear. There's something else going on in the backdrop of those. No? It's not that hate and fear are in themselves a root cause of something, but the root cause of all problem is just the absence of awareness, if you want to put that way, the absence of awareness, that's a good word, of the reality of love. So we are choosing to look into a direction where we cannot perceive love again, because this needs to be an option, because if not, love stops being voluntary. So if we have no option about whether we choose to look at the face of love or not, that option is not there. Love is no longer voluntary. And if love is not a voluntary act, it contradicts its basic definition, and it's no longer love. So that's the risk, if you will, of love that we can witness. All the problems of the world, you can define it. That's the risk of love, the implications of love being voluntary. But yeah, I wouldn't define hate, fear, and all this as the opposite of love, because again, if we really get a grasp onto what's true love, it has no opposite. There's nothing that can compete with love. It's always growing, always evolving. That's the main theme of the book. It's always becoming more of what it is. It's an unstoppable force. So we cannot even talk about something competing with that, an opposite to that. We can just speak about an absence of awareness of that reality that is always evolving. So that's what our tradition will say by avidya. Absence of vidya, ultimately vidya meaning love. The ultimate knowledge is love. When you love, you know things for what they are. So
we can say then that love is beyond the realm of dualities.
Love is beyond, sorry?
The realm of dualities. So it's not like
Yeah.
love, hate, and happiness, sadness, and things like that. So it's beyond all that.
Yeah.
And to me, this is also giving this helps build trust, because when we understand there is no opposite to love, we can really trust that we are safe.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Love is beyond dualities. That doesn't mean that love does not express itself in various ways, but it's beyond dualistic thinking. And actually, that's why love can accommodate so many things that without love, you cannot accommodate. So many apparently contradictory things that find their harmony in love. What we may call paradoxes or paradoxical thinking. If you love, you naturally have a capacity for paradoxical thinking, of holding apparent opposites in harmony, finding higher synthesis. But when we have no love, we see reality in a very fragmented, dualistic way, us and them, black and white, this group and that group. That's, as I always like to say, that's how the Bhagavad Gita sets the problem at its very onset in the first verse, Pandavas and Kurus, us and them mentality. And then the whole book is about yoga, about reunion, reconciliation, bringing it together, the ultimate yoga for us, which is bhakti or love. So yeah, love is beyond duality. Love takes us beyond duality, invites us to accommodate and harmonize everything. Like Srila Siddhar Maharaj will say, love moves like a snake. not only because of its crooked movement, it's unpredictable, but because in that zigzag movement, it's accommodating and including and integrating and harmonizing everything on its way, instead of walking in a straight way and missing all the things that go on both sides, right? So it integrates, accommodates diversity, paradox, and itself expresses in a multiplicity of ways. Now, love in one sense is uniform. It's one thing, unconditional, ever expanding, never stops being love, but it's pluriform, takes a plurality of forms in different directions at the same time. Veda Ved, that will be a way of us talking our tradition about love being one and different. And as you say, Sveta Devradika, in practical terms, it gives us this safe place to land, to be, to belong, to participate in reality without division, without conflict, to take real rest, so to say, in that fact, and celebrate existence forever, basically. Yeah.
And to take risks.
Yes. Love ultimately is about risk-taking. That's a separate, different conversation, but yeah, it's very related. And these days, actually, I was thinking about writing some article about that in connection to a recent exchange I had with another author who wrote about the topic erotic decisions. And we ended up conversing about the concept of Proactiva in our tradition, the glove, the gopis in Vrindavan for Krishna, which is a love, an extramarital love, like a clandestine affair, which involves so much risk at every moment. And for us, that's the highest love, basically. The love in which one is willing to risk, to risk for the sake of love. Again, so in that sense, there is no risk at all. If it's for the sake of love, you are not losing anything valuable because you are doing it for the sake of the ultimate value. But at the same time, you're willing to let go of whatever gets in the way of that ultimate value. And yeah, we can call that risk-taking. And there's a lot to say about that. So thank you for bringing that to the table, at least as in the form of an appetizer.
Yeah. Thank you both very much for participating in this. Next, we will have Deva Madhava will be joining us and to further explore these topics. But thank you very much, Maharaj, for again deepening and opening the door for these topics and our hearts, and yeah, so that we can actually step into this world of love. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Today we are so happy to welcome Deva Madhava to the arena. And yes, Deva Madhava brings a very special and unique flavor to things. He's deeply rooted in individuation in the context of community, and how one fulfills and really nourishes the other. So very glad to have you here, Deva Madhava, today.
Always happy for the chance to spend some time with this Sangha. Thank you, Bhakti Rasa, for inviting me again.
Thanks. So today, Sweta Dweep, Radhika, myself, Deva Madhava, will be discussing the first and second section in chapter 1 of Evolution and Divine Love. And the people that were chosen to speak about particular sections were chosen on purpose. So this first one that we touched down on is love as the ultimate ethic. And this, again, Deva Madhava, I think this is a specialty of yours, dealing with ethics and governance and things that really light your heart. So I'm wondering what it is to you that, what does it mean that love is the ultimate ethic? And even if you want to explain what ethic is to you.
Thank you for such an easy question as the first one we get to talk about. The impression that I had when I read the section, first off, relating it to my own sense of purpose as a community director. For those that may not know, for about a decade here in Michigan, USA, we've had a small Bhakti community that's been slowly but surely growing, and a lot of growing pains in terms of understanding what village life is about. I don't even like that word community anymore. I'm interested in building a village, and the purpose of a village, and what is not the purpose of a village, and what do people usually get confused in between that. And over the last year and a half or so, my own sense of purpose has really been the village, the community, and its ethics or its purposes, its principles, its guiding ideas of how to carry oneself. It's all for the purpose, really, of creating a place where people can be emotionally vulnerable. And once emotional vulnerability is made safe and possible, then there's not only a clarity that comes, but there's a depth of experience that everybody has with each other that becomes irreplaceable. They can't get it anywhere else, literally. You can't buy it. You can't walk into another place, no matter how nice it is, no matter how well curated that other place is. You can't go where you've been with those folks that you've had emotional depth with. And when I was reading Maharaj's opening descriptions there in the first chapter, and he was comparing the existent nature of reality, of the absolute, that it exists, and then there's love that comes as a consequence of existence, or the two are like necessary components of each other. I was thinking that love is sort of the emotional expression of the sentient absolute. And in a on the ground way, our emotions that we feel as individuals, and the way we create an atmosphere for each of us to share and exchange and reveal those emotions, to churn those emotions as a village, as a community, that's what it means to have love as an ethic. That I recognize that potential in each of the folks that I've trusted, and that's a tough question. Who do I trust to create that with? But putting that aside for a moment, that potential is there in each individual, and it's my responsibility to offer that to them, and to make a space where they feel welcome to offer it to me. And then we call that exchange love, and it can always grow, and it can always deepen, and it can become more intense perpetually. And that's why it's such a worthy ethic, is it remains beyond all of us, and at the same time eminently graspable in the moment. I can get a piece of it always, and I never have all of it. So it creates a helpful spurning, like a pushing for everybody to be striving towards, which is essential in a village, in a community. You have to have something you're working for.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. I do really value the relationships that you have with each other in the Harmony Collective. And a word that Maharaj uses in this section is also catalyst. That love is a catalyst. And you mentioned purpose. So it's really struck me not too long ago when Maharaj said that the purpose of purpose is love.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is how we can draw down from the absolute plane into our everyday life, is to look at, because we know about purpose, we think about purpose all the time, but what's that purpose based on? We can think, oh, well, I have a purpose. I need to take care of my family, so I need to make money. But what is that purpose? What is the purpose of taking care of your family based on?
Yes. And so if you just keep peeling that question back, then you get to this place of I want and need love.
Yeah.
And so do the people around me.
Yeah, it all comes to love. It all comes to love.
There's something that I say. Oh, sorry, Sweta. I don't see you on the screen, so please share.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just going to say that I really love how you switched from community to calling it a village,
Mm.
because that shows there's something about, like, the expansive nature, like how, going from community to village shows that you're expanding. Village somehow feels like much larger. And Maharaj talks about that in this section particularly, that, love is expansive. It's not something that we can, like, confine and, like, we try to define it, but it is not something that we can define. We have to humble ourselves and, just go with the evolution, with the flow. So
Mm.
yeah, I was connecting that.
I'm really happy you picked up on the idea that village is a bigger idea than a community. And ironically, one of the reasons that I find it so useful right now is because it also limits the scope from the kind of shallow vision. It limits the scope of who we as our community, our village, who we're concerned with, because especially within our Bhakti movement, there's always been and will remain in some for good reason also this call to, like, treat everyone with love. But we also know that as aspiring lovers, we have a very limited capacity to show up powerfully, even for ourselves, even for our family, and if the few people that we, would sign on the line to say, I care about. Never mind somebody that we only see once a week at the Sunday feast. Never mind the guy that just walked in the door because he thinks this is some meditation, center. He can sit in Zazen for 3 hours here. The call to love all of that before I'm even able to offer deeply myself to a few has been kind of crippling. And so calling the village is to say, yeah, let's make it big and let's make it deep, but within this limited sphere.
That's again, like, aligns with the paradoxical nature of love.
Yeah, right. The paradox. Yes.
Yeah, that's
I was going to just a quick phrase that I like to say around here, because there's a million and one things to do when you have properties and a space to manage and programs to put on, and somebody's got to do all the little tasks. And we like to say, just let it be for Krishna. But we could transpose, it's synonymous with let it be for love. Just, you're going to do it anyway. Anyway, it's, as you said, Bhakti, anyway, you're going to go make some money and pay some bills and feed some people. Let it be for love. Take a moment to reflect and bring yourself to that potential as much as you can in that moment, that this is for what matters most. This is for my relationship to truth. This is for my relationship to love.
Yeah, and to have love as the goal of everything we do. I mean, it sounds like so simple in one sense and so Pollyanna also, but there's a definition of sin being missing the mark.
Mm.
But in one way, it becomes very simple if we make the mark love. And then we can identify our own behaviors as to being helpful or not helpful. Is this moving me toward love? Is this moving in one way or another for my own self in relationship? Is it helping another person feel lovable? So I've come to think that, like, if we want to call it sin, that the deepest cut that we can do is to give people ammunition that they are not loved, that they are unlovable. So as a guiding ethic, to have love as a guiding ethic in as much as possible. And that, like you said, Deva Madhava, is so important. It all begins at home, and that home actually is our own heart. And to learn how to embrace and to feel love, our own self-love, self-care in the context of bhakti, everything within the context of that. But yes, it begins at home, because if we don't embrace that ourselves and feel that connection, then we'll kind of just be offloading our necessities to other people, to other things. And that's the stuff that we stuff in a way to fill that gap is what gets in the way. So it does begin at home, and then to just be able to consider even what we, how we conceive of things. Will this somehow end in love?
How can we tell?
How can we tell?
Yeah.
Well, for my own self, if I feel connected, if I feel present, if I feel able to, if I feel more whole in my own self and the different parts of myself feel integrated, my emotions and my psychology and my humanity, is if it's feeling connected and whole and part of a larger being. And in this way, as I become more myself and move in that direction, then community also becomes more meaningful, more alive, and I'm more accessible. I have more to access in my own self to be able to offer to others, simply as kind of not an action outside, something separate from, but just an overflow of.
Yeah, when I hear you speak about examining your own experience and feeling, there's that remembrance of this reflexive rejection of that a lot of spiritual communities, including the Bhakti one, kind of gives, at least preliminary, that your own psyche has kind of betrayed you for so long. You've gotten connected to all these bad habits out of unhealthy needs and desires, or at least unhealthy pursuit of meeting them. And so now you have to walk away from your own internal compass, your own like sense of what's good and bad, and kind of onboard this framework and follow that framework as your assessment metric. And while that has like some utility in the early phases, so to speak, of a serious spiritual practice, I myself have also like lost interest in that idea as being useful, especially for myself. And now when I hear someone like yourself, who I deeply respect, say, yeah, first thing I do is check and see how I felt about it. I'm reminded that's actually so intuitively important and valuable. I like to cook, and what was coming to mind about learning to cook is that the first thing any good cook needs to do is understand what happens when you put salt in something. And once you know how to salt something, all the other nuances can be adjusted, right? You learn how to spice and what veggies and etc. go well together, and what grains to use where, and how much oil and fat and heat and all the other things. But no matter what else you learn, if salt is not there, no one's going to like it. And if you put the right amount of salt, even if everything else is kind of weird and wonky, it's still going to taste okay. And I'm using that now, just as you were sharing. I'm seeing that as the place to get to in my own internal awareness of like, I cannot say I know what love is, but I know enough about how to salt a dish that I can say there's love, there's enough salt here, there's enough love in what I've just done or what that person's done to like feel safe about what's happening. And the rest, the more nuanced elements, maybe I don't know enough about that yet, but the salt is good, so we'll keep going. Or the salt is too much or not enough, and so we need to pause and examine something here.
Yeah, and that's when you don't notice the salt, is
when it's just right.
When it's right. You only notice it when it's off. Too much, too little, it becomes very obvious. But just the right amount, you don't notice it. It enhances and it brings out the nuances, the flavors of the other things around it.
Mm.
It's
Yes.
interesting with the salt example because now I'm questioning, is too much love a problem?
I would venture to say yes, in the sense that because when one's idea of love is not aligned with the truth of love, then you get, as an example, the kind of false positive culture that we see today. I'll just manifest my own desires and destinies, whatever they are. I can make it happen. And I don't love myself enough. And that's why it hasn't worked yet. I don't love that person enough. And that's why they continue to mistreat me. That kind of misunderstanding of the reality of love, I think, does invite an excessive deference to like a very sickly, sanguine version of love that's not actually faithful to the truth of it. And then it tastes too salty. It's like, it's too sweet. It's too salty. It's like, too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I guess like the balance is the key everywhere. Have the right balance. Yeah. I was also wondering, I mean, I wanted to hear more from you regarding what you said about having the limits, like around your village. Like you want to start with like, pouring out that love within the limits, taking care of that, like, first.
Yeah.
So like, are you envisioning this to like, start there and eventually like expand that and like let that overflow outside? Or you think that it should happen in like, smaller like villages similar to yours, and then there is intersection like that?
Personally, I'm past the point of trying to strategize for others, but I can, although it's a favorite video game of mine. But I was reading the Bible last Easter, and one of the apostles was writing a letter back to one of their congregations, and the letter said, if they cannot, if their family is not well, if their women and children are not well, then do not let them become deacons. If their family, right, if the immediate sphere of their influence and care and concern are not obviously healthy and decent by their protection and care, speaking of men, obviously, don't let them become leaders in the church in any, even in a small way, just like a deacon, which is in this context, I think, kind of like a junior pastor, we could say. Don't let them rise up in sphere of care before they've shown competency here. And again, with this mandate coming from our acharyas and our shastra and the opportunity of love itself, there is this feeling of like, yeah, it should be for everyone everywhere, and I have to like act on that all the time. And if I'm not, then I've failed. And so I will, but I can't. So I have to pretend. It creates all kinds of awkwardnesses. And what I've found in my own experience from my own life, and also those that I care about and that I'm trying to support, if I speak to the lower standard in terms of the scope of their love and the scope of their attention and affection, then ironically that leaves space for them to reach out further beyond that kind of baseline standard. But if I give too much expectation of extending love beyond what they're ready to show up for, then they often don't even meet the kind of bare minimum that they ought to at that phase of their life. So unmet expectations are crippling, as we all know. And why not give people credit for taking care of the basics and let that confidence that builds inside of them because of that act as an overflow into the lives of others that they otherwise might not have touched. That's been, in my experience of trying the two, that's my experience of what's more effective and more reasonable to expect for other places and other people, as much as I can be a part of encouraging that.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was thinking because in this particular section, there's an emphasis on like, loving God alone is not enough.
Enough, right?
Like loving God means like loving everything in relation to Him, which is like everything. But yeah, like you were saying, I mean, we need to start somewhere and also be mindful of what we are capable of, and also keeping it real and not having over expectations and yeah, just making it worse, basically.
Yeah. My first time I went on pilgrimage in India, I remember there was a crowd of like 1,500 of us walking around Navadvip, and there was a noticeable group of about 30 young boys from age 6 to 22 or so, I would guess. And there was a very clear ethic of care between this group of like 60 boys. An 8-year-old would be holding the hand of two 5 or 6-year-olds. And then there would be like a 10 or 12-year-old watching 2 or 3 8-year-olds who's holding the hand of two 5 or 6-year-olds. And then there'd be like 2 or 3 22-year-olds up at the front watching over all of the 8 and 12 and 16-year-olds who were all looking after a couple people younger than them, but also being looked after by a couple people older than them. And there can be many things said about the efforts of that group otherwise, but I think this was something really wholesome that came out of that synthesis for years that happened in Mayapur. Was everyone needs a little bit of responsibility to love, and everyone needs to feel that somebody's looking after them, somebody's loving them. And if that's felt above and below, then people grow. And one day you end up with a Prabhupada, once in a while. One day you end up with a Padmanabha Swami, once in a while. One day you end up with a personality who's able to expand outside of any like natural immediate limit of their social situation, and just love everybody wherever they go, really just show up powerfully, whomever, wherever. To ask that of everyone is just naive and actually destructive. And Narad Muni in the 7th canto, he says, a real Brahmana is one who understands that one standard for one person is not fit for another person. And if you ask somebody to meet a standard that they're not able to, you just end up with dysfunction, which is largely what we have today. So the opportunity of just taking care of those right in front of us and feeling cared for by the folks that are supposed to be looking after us, it would just be a miracle if everybody could feel that.
Yeah. Maharaj also says about how loving everyone, everything includes ourselves. So knowing our limits and, yeah, what we can do, what we are capable of is part of loving ourselves, which is the most important to begin with. If that's missing, then we can't really expand out.
And what you were saying also really speaks to evolution itself as a process of refinement, love and evolution. We have felt love throughout our lives, different kinds of love, but it's the refinement of love that is the evolving process itself. So it's not necessarily that, and paradoxically also is the finer that it gets. And in our Bhakti tradition, we use the word unalloyed, which means free of alloys, free of things that are not it, free of things that are not love. So the refining process actually becomes an expansive process simultaneously without artificial endeavor, but simply as a nature, as a quality of its own nature, that love is always expansive in its refinement.
Yeah, beautiful. It reminds me, because Maharaj references Jiva Goswami a few times just in that first chapter. And something that a friend pointed to of Jiva Goswami's commentary a few years ago is that everything that is worthy that a person can do, it has a little bit of love in it. It has to. Otherwise, it's not worthy. That's the point. That's why it's worthy. That's why it feels good. That's why we encourage others to do it, because it has a little bit of love in it, and it's leading to love. And in a kind of practical way, that's why the Vedas, that's why if you read like just other portion, it's funny because as Hare Krishnas, we think we read the Vedas, but none of us have ever read the Vedas. We've read the Bhagavatam, we've read the Bhagavad Gita, but we've never opened the Rig Veda or the Sama Veda and sat there and gone verse by verse. And if you see passages from those texts, they talk about planting a tree like you've just chanted Shuddha Nam. Like you've just entered the pearly gates of Vaikuntha because you planted a tree. And the irony is that if you've ever seen somebody do something good for the first time, if you've ever seen somebody have that breakthrough of like, oh, when I'm nice, it actually makes me feel good, you're witnessing them experiencing prema. You're witnessing them experiencing the expansiveness of love in that moment for the first time, at least in a long time, if not for the very first time. That soul has been cracked open and has found a part of themselves they didn't know existed because of that act that connected them to the possibility of refined love. And we sometimes limit ourselves from experiencing those everyday moments of expansion because it doesn't matter. I'm not Jesus yet, and so I don't love yet. I'm not Prabhupada yet, so I don't love yet. But maybe love is just planting the tree. Maybe love is going and helping the neighbor weed their garden because it got out of hand. Maybe love is watching your neighbor's dog over the weekend. Like love can show up in those very simple ways for those of us who are still in the simple phase, so to speak, of our development, and to not discourage people from having that vision, but rather celebrating when they tune in to like how love can expand for them in this moment. I found that to be really exciting, even for myself. Like, it's ironic, like I get more excited for people sometimes for making little human steps in their life than I do when I hear, they distributed a book or they went out on Harinam or, they did some religious thing that we're supposed to do because we're a part of a certain community. There's a part of me now that gets more excited when I hear like they got a job.
Yeah, it's like what I caught from what you're saying is one is like the sense of duty. Like I'm supposed to distribute books, I'm supposed to do that. Like you use the word supposed to, versus
Yes.
like planting a tree because you want to and coming out of love. So yeah, in this section also Maharaj mentions about the duty and it's not love is beyond sense of duty. So it's not something you do because like although like we do read in the scriptures like people worshiping God as a sense of duty. And I'm thinking that is the initial stages, like a Vaidhi Bhakti part of it. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I've helped a few friends who are very adjacent people in professional settings and things that I've helped come closer to Krishna consciousness, Bhakti. And I've come to see karma, dharma, and bhakti as really supportive of each other when you understand the value and like the decision-making process at each level. The level of karma is a decision-making process which represents a level of refinement if prior to that you didn't understand that your choices have consequences. And this is why you have YouTube and Instagram influencers that can say things like, wake up on time and drink water and go to bed. And they have millions of followers and they make millions of dollars because there's so many people in this harassed world that we live in that have lost touch with that very simple truth that your choices have consequences. So that's a level of karma, like drink your water and go to bed on time and eat the right things and treat people in a certain, basic, decent way, and you'll be happier. And it works. And when you start to see that my choices have consequences, and when I make good choices, the consequences are really uplifting and sweet and joyful, like love. I can get love from just drinking some water every day. That starts to hint at this larger benevolence of the universe, this larger benevolence of the world that we're in. It's not here to get me. No one's like attacking me, actually. It's not wrong. It's actually all good. And I'm just the one who's not aligned well enough yet. And you start to ask questions. How can I align with that principle of benevolence? That's the Dharma layer. So nobody who has a sense of duty is just doing it because you have to. You don't have to. You're doing it because you know there's some faith and some taste of a larger truth that you can't perceive with total clarity yet, but you've got conviction it's there. And so you're ready to follow these prescriptions, trusting that this is the general way I can align with this thing that I don't always recognize moment to moment. And then as you have aggregate experiences of that dharmic connection through dutiful action, truth comes and you recognize it in more and more and more circumstances. That's when the picture becomes clearer and bhakti happens, because you can see the person that all this benevolence has come from. You can see that that benevolence is actually love that I've been allowed to be connected with this whole time. And now I just want to connect with it all the time.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Again, it's to me, the word keeps coming of refinement. It's like I don't know if we have to see those things as even something separate or a process of each other. Like you were saying, the one thing leads to the other. So it's all like one process that is leading to refined love. And to me, it's really speaks to support the concept that God is nothing but love. And everything that we experience, everything that's here that we can see and taste and touch and feel and even think, that also is God. So everything is actually made of a loving substance. And that allows Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Sridhar Maharaj to say that the environment is friendly.
Friendly. I love that one.
I mean, it must be so, because
Yes.
God is love and there is nothing but God.
Thank you for saying that, Bhakti Rasa, because I myself could do well to pay more attention to my karma sometimes, right? I could do well to go to bed on time and drink a little more water and clean up my day-to-day choices, because it's so supportive of that higher experience and it's not exclusive of. They do meld quite naturally and unavoidably. So I spoke to that framework to kind of like make these distinctions to help people recognize them, but it also is a disservice to make it seem like it's just a ladder you're climbing, and one day it's all beneath you except whatever love means at that top level. It's all integrated in our moment to moment opportunity. So thank you for calling attention to that. It's really empowering, I find.
Yeah, and why do we want to drink love? I don't want to drink love. Well, I do want to drink love. Why do we want to drink water? Why do we want to take care of the body?
Yeah, just like you were
Because,
saying at the beginning.
yeah, it's not separate. We don't have different projects. We don't have a human life and a spiritual life. It's all one life. We are just one being. We are one person, and it's all the same process. So everything can be integrated and seen within that whole concept of everything being love, moving toward it, an expansive expression of it.
Yeah, and in that verse of Jiva Goswami where you're saying like love is like it's unalloyed, and along with that he says it's uninterrupted also. So that to me says that it's always there. There is no interruption. There's no falling out of it or falling down or like any of that. We are always there.
Yes.
Like experiencing love around us, within us. Like you were saying, we just don't know sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And we can look within ourselves also and consider, well, okay, if this is true, why am I not experiencing love? Why am I not experiencing it every moment? If this is reality.
And that takes such bravery in my experience. And that is it's like a turn. I can't even say I've made it yet in my life, but I can see that it's a stage that all must pass through to accept that standard that you just spoke to, Bhakti Rasa. That it really could be every moment, and I could examine, at the very least, I could examine that for myself, and to take on the responsibility of admitting that. It's a tall order for many. I say that including myself.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't want to go neurotic over it either, but we don't want to bypass it because
Exactly.
this is reality. And when we find ourselves feeling disconnected and feeling small and unworthy, and if we come back to this center reality that all is love, so what is it? Why am I not experiencing that? And to look at our own brokenness in relationship with that.
And I think I can say I have, and maybe others would relate, that the neurotic version of that self-examination comes from anchoring love to some idea of like a material perfection. Love looks this way. And if it doesn't look this way, then it's not love. And that standard will always fail because there can always be more. There can always be better or worse from a material side. Today is 85 degrees in Michigan and somebody's happy and somebody's sad because it's just a material situation. So love must be on some standard, not just pertaining to the shape and size of the stuff. We have to let our standard of love grow beyond that to, I think, as we spoke to earlier, the experiential and intentional side. I intended well here, and perhaps the result can always be better. I remember there's one anecdote of Prabhupada. He had his disciples raising funds to build the many centers around the world. And so one of the disciples that was looking after that service, he came into his guru's office, put a briefcase on the desk, and Prabhupada knew what was in the briefcase. He said, "How much?" And very, proudly, the devotee, with I would imagine a little bit of a smile, says, $108,000, Prabhupada, which for almost anyone here, they would know. 108 is an auspicious number in the Vedic tradition. So $108,000, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, just without even looking up, he says 109 would have been better. Just to give a little poke to the pride of this disciple who was clearly a little bit ahead of himself in terms of what he thought he had done to save the planet and whatever. So from the material side, there's always better. There's always something else. From the external side, we can say there's always some refinement. But in this moment, did I bring the intention of love to learn to hold ourselves to that standard is, in my experience, how we get away from that neuroses that you pointed to, Bhakti Rasa, of giving ourselves a literally impossible standard to meet by expecting some kind of material perfection.
Yeah, that's really interesting because as you're speaking, I'm also kind of thinking of another aspect of reality where there is no fixed maximum on love. So I think what happens like is, as humans, as dysfunctional as we are, that reality is reality. Everything is based on it. But we distort it in some way or another because we are misaligned or off center. So the reality that love has no fixed maximum, that evolution, that there is always an ongoing process of becoming. If we are not properly aligned with that and don't approach it in a healthy way, then that can become a neurotic, goal-driven thing as opposed to just a spontaneous way of being. We can take a reality, not recognizing that this actually is a quality of God. This is part of the absolute, and kind of like try to stuff it, and then it gets tweaked by our small sense of self and our ego and our wounds. But in reality, all these things that we feel are right, that we move towards just naturally, are because that it starts with God. We have His DNA, but it's squeaking out in different ways. And when we can connect it, oh, this is what it actually, yes, this is real, but it's tweaked right now. It's distorted, and can connect it back to the wholesome source in divinity, then I think we can spiritualize our humanity, contextualize it in spiritual life.
I'm remembering back in college, I love your reflection, Dr. Ross, and I'm reminded way before I'd met any spiritual people that moved my heart. I had a friend named Patterson, and she was very naturally bubbly and affectionate and just like kind to everyone. Like pictures of Buddha everywhere. Like maybe you all have had the privilege of meeting a person like this, just genuinely nice. And Patterson's like, I just love everybody. And I remember in my like peak, atheistic, pessimistic, nihilistic 20-year-old self, I was like, you can't do that. That's not possible. There's no way that's true. And now it's funny that here I am finding myself like hoping to say that with conviction. I love everybody.
That's why it struck you so hard back then, because that desire was in your heart at that
Yeah,
moment.
hopefully. That's your kind vision of my pessimism.
Yeah, beautiful. So one other thing, just to touch upon in this section of the book is, which we also talked about earlier, is the spontaneity and the container and kind of rules, right? So we think, which ties in with the ethics, we think that things that are spontaneous perhaps shouldn't have rules, but even within spontaneity, there is a kind of order. So I was thinking of like jazz, and improv. Improv can only happen if there's a basis of order, a basis of rule. Otherwise, it just is noise. So you speak of the container. You have the Bhakti's Bill of Rights. So this to me is like a container within which it provides expansiveness. And I think this is like your idea also going back to the village, that yes, there is a boundary to the village, but within that boundary, it provides great depth.
I'm going way back in my memory now. I'm leaning over my fourth grade classroom desk, zoning out and not paying attention to my teacher. And I'm looking down at the tile floor, and there's square tile, green, and those like lead green and off-white tiles, like, asbestos, probably, whatever they're made of. And I'm looking down at the tile floor, and I'm looking at the square, and I'm thinking how many squares can be made inside that square. And my little fourth grade brain realizes there's no limit to the number of squares that could be put inside of this one square. And that is, I think, what you're pointing to, Bhakti Rasa, with this potential of boundary and the importance of it. That's one of the words in modern kind of like trauma speak and self-help, etc., is like learning how to set healthy boundaries for yourself. Learning how to hold others to those is being recognized as very valuable for cultivating a healthy identity personally and living a healthy life. And the same is true of a community. The same is true of an organization. And although many people's experience of authority, etc., gives them a bad taste in the mouth when rules and regulations come in, it's undeniable that there's value there for people learning to love. There needs to be some clarity about where the lines are drawn, what is okay and what's not okay, when should you be worried, and when should you just be brave and keep going. Without those clear lines, everybody's left to their own to figure that out, and then it's hard to make progress together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when those lines are established on the purpose of purpose, on the ethic of love, then everything moves in and supports that in that direction, and can move healthily in that direction without it becoming a Pollyanna kind of thing. And oh yes, everything's good, and I'm good, I'm okay, you're okay, la di
I'm
da.
okay, you're okay.
But to actually have things conceived of intentionally to support and to move us toward that ultimate ethic.
Yes. And it's something that everyone is not responsible for figuring out, but everyone is responsible for aligning with. And that's how you choose your village. Can I trust those who are making the call on what love is over here? And the idea that everybody should kind of like co-create and collaborate to make that clear and possible, you just end up with that same confusion. You end up with that same feeling of uncertainty that creates poor choices. There's going to be difficult moments, and somebody has to make the choices around those difficult moments, and not everyone's always going to be happy with each individual choice. And so then coming back to our point a little earlier, are you able to trust that that person made the choice from a place of love? They made the choice well-intentioned, well-examined, doing all the kind of preliminaries that you would want them to do to then be peaceful with the result, as Krishna says, to be peaceful with the result. And the duty was done, and now the rest is in the hands of God. That is the metric to look for in choosing and also curating your village. Not did they do it perfect every time according to whichever blog article you've read recently.
Yeah, that's so cool. And the trust can only happen, it's built, it's a process also, but in relationship.
Yeah.
It is built in relationship. So even we can't have just an expectation of God, like a concept of God that is absent of our relationship with God. And to be able to trust that everything is coming from this good place, we actually need to develop a relationship, and not just that to me, without the relationship, it's an empty hope.
That gives a really cool definition also of relationship. The relationships are those connections in which you are developing trust, and that there is some trust already developed. I love that as an idea, an ideal of what that purpose is, and how trust is not a black and white thing. It's not a switch on the wall that you flip on and off.
Yeah, and it's even it will look differently, and it will feel differently, and we'll have a different way to define trust also. As we ourselves evolve and progress, our understanding of trust will also evolve and progress.
Well, share? I'd love to hear from both of you right now what your personal sense of trust is. Like, what is that standard or ethic for yourself in your life right now?
I'll go first, and then perhaps Swetadrup can share. For me, trust is a deep knowing that the other person has my best regard and my highest potential in mind, and that they are relating with me honestly, from where they're coming from, but that they have the best intention for my well-being in mind. And that to me develops a sense of trust, because even if something doesn't look the way I would want it to look or feel the way I want it to feel, knowing that deeply, that this person has this intention, that they want the best for me. They want my best for me, not somebody else's best for me, but my best for me.
Yeah.
And I can fully trust into that, lean into that.
Mm.
Yeah. For me, I think like one thing that came to my mind is, like you were saying earlier, trust happens in a relationship. So for me, trust is like when I'm able to be myself, authentic, like with everything, how I can act, speak, be, and the other person or a community even like accepts all of that. And it's not just one-sided, you know. If I'm able to be myself, my true self, which means the others also have to be their true selves. So to me, like that environment brings trust, and there's love also, and they kind of go together.
Would you care for me to share my answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, please.
Thank you both. I share in what you've said. Maybe a place that I'm looking at right now and just noticing I had a moment to like ask myself, who do I trust the most? and what is it about those relationships that, and I'm going to keep it individual. What is it about those relationships that give me that feeling of trust? Right now, for me, it's people who have a healthy sense of their own limitations. That's what gives me a sense of reassurance, that I can trust our interactions. I can count on what they say. If they're a person who has really examined their limitations and become appreciative, accepting and appreciative of that, I kind of presume it's been something that I've had with me my whole life, that I can see is a kind of presumption of goodwill, that people want to do right. They want to do the right thing. And that's definitely done me more good than bad to think that way. So I've been able to hold on to it. And the folks who did bad, it's really, if I look back, mostly because they didn't know who they were yet. They don't know who they are. And so they're talking about being something that they're not, and then they can't be that. And then there's a lot of disappointment that follows. So I think that would be my own frame right now that I'm most alert to, is a person who has examined their own limitations and is comfortable with them.
All of those are so beautiful, and the common thread to me I'm hearing is like integrity. Someone who has integrity, who knows their own selves, and like you said, the limits of what they can, what they can't do, honors that, and offers what they can. Yeah, that's beautiful.
And being real.
Yes, that is a huge part of it.
Yeah, not acting to trying to be able to fit in or to have a bigger sense of self, because actually not feeling worthy
Yeah,
in
people
themselves.
please, all of that.
Yeah.
Join the club.
So the thing that's awesome is that God, he doesn't have low self-esteem. He knows exactly who he is, what he can do, and even he's always testing his limits also. So he recognizes that he has limits, and tries to go beyond them in the expansion of love.
Mm.
So he's quite trustworthy.
We were reading, singing a prayer of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's a few days ago with some friends, and the translation of one of the lines was, "I am a treasured object of the Lord." I'm treasured. And we, in our reflection time afterwards, it was coming out from all of us like, yeah, what if I just lived remembering that not only does God, like, sometimes we say God loves us and we almost imply like he has to, you know, it's his job to love us because he made us. So, you know, here I am. But what if we really carried ourselves with that awareness? How much love would I show up with if I remembered that I am a treasured object of the Lord?
Yeah, so beautiful. In the podcast that is airing today, that we're recording this, a beautiful talk between Swami Padmanabha and Robert Nicastro. And Robert brings up the word cherished.
Wow. Yes.
That for us to feel cherished by God, that's where it all begins.
Amen.
On this note, I know that you have other obligations, and our episode here is coming to an end. And we are going to be ending all of our episodes with kind of a beginning, but with a reflection as to what we spoke about in the first and second part of the episode. The first part with Swami Padmanabha, and the second part now with Deva Madhava and our future guests. So we have a few contemplations for you to take with you.
Pause for a moment to consider your previous understanding of love. How does it align with or differ from the perspective of love as an intentional self-disposition focused on the well-being of others? Reflect on your willingness to embrace an eternal, unpredictable dance guided by divine love's spontaneous movements. Does this prospect resonate with you? Are you ready to step into that dance today? If not, identify any fears or hesitations holding you back, and consider how you might move toward trusting love's dynamic, transformative flow.